Hi everybody, welcome back to your financial literacy course. This is our second part of our second module dealing with money management. In our first part of money management, we talked about financial goals, and we used the acronym SMART, talking about the different items that need to be available for us and the different things that we need to do in order to understand how we will be spending our money. Today, we're going to go into a little more detail, and we're going to look at how exactly we can formulate a spending plan that will help us to make the best possible economic choices. Today, as we go through this, not only will we eventually be able to create a spending plan, but we'll be able to understand what we need to do as consumers to guide ourselves through that spending. Guiding your spending is one of the biggest steps that you can take in money management. We talked a lot about in the last presentation about needs and wants. Those things are still with us in our lives, but we need to understand what will guide us and when we choose to make those economic decisions. What I would like everybody to do right now is to pause the video. And after you pause the video, look through these different situations that are presented to you. Each one of the 5 bullets on the screen right now present a different idea, and those different ideas deal with whether or not you will walk into a store or walk past an object or stand in line, and what additional cost you might incur that you had no intention of having. We also need to understand that as we buy certain things in our lives, there's always going to be situations that arise that take us away from our plan. That could be a financial plan, that could be a life plan, that could be a variety of different things. Well, one idea that we know, if you look at the 9 items that are listed on the screen, each one of those is a cost that we would incur should something happen to that given item. Think about how much it would cost to repair or replace each of the following. A flat screen TV is not cheap. Your laptop could be a very big cost to you. Imagine you're sitting in your dorm next year in college and you're writing a paper, and the next thing you know, your computer shuts down and your hard drive is zapped. That is a cost that we have to be willing to plan for, and one that we must be able to deal with at some point in time. Viruses on our computer, or a fender bender that we might be in. Even a flat tire can come up out of the blue, and the next thing we know, we're facing a $200 replacement bill from a given auto parts store. Fractured or broken bones might hurt us in terms of our insurance costs. Losing your cell phone or your iPod, things that may be accessories to us, but also things that we understand we need to replace. Or running out of gas. We've all seen people walking down the side of the road to the nearest gas station. We know your car won't operate without gasoline in it. Therefore, what happens? Are we prepared? Do we have the money to be able to walk to that gas station and put gasoline in our car? So all of these things are extra costs that we may not anticipate. And that word anticipate is key here. When we're making our spending plan, we must always deal with the anticipation that there is going to be a cost that will come up that we weren't expecting. Benjamin Franklin had a great quote, and that quote was, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." I know it might seem much more drastic than the situation we're dealing with now, but that happens financially. If we prepare ourselves for that unexpected cost, if we anticipate that unexpected cost in our future, we know that when the time comes, we'll be ready to deal with it. But if we fail to prepare ourselves financially, if we fail to save a given amount of money, when we need something or when we want something, we will be unable to attain it. So the first thing that we need to do in terms of making a spending plan and kind of mapping out our success for the future, we need to establish our priorities. These priorities can help us to make progress in order to achieve the goals, but they, more often than not, help us to avoid traps and buyer's remorse. We've all made a purchase in our lives, gone out and bought a piece of clothing, or a material good, or a piece of technology, or maybe even gone out to get something to eat. And right after we buy it, we experience what's called buyer's remorse. We realize we may not have necessarily needed to do what we just did. Priorities also help us to establish situations and responses that will allow us to deal with the unexpected costly events. Priorities and planning will allow us to have money on hand when we need it. Money in our bank account, money at home. But somewhere we will have the money that we need to pay for those unexpected costs. But most importantly, out of all of these, it puts you in control of how your money is used. Later on in these modules, we'll start to talk about credit and debt and risk and insurance, all things that can become traps for us as consumers. We need to understand that we put ourselves in the best possible financial position when we are in control of our future. So we go back to our two friends from the first module, Michael and Selena. Remember, Michael is the high school senior, Selena is the high school freshman. Michael has to undertake much of his own cost and much of his own expenses. Selena depends on her parents and her job for most of her money. You see there, Michael's spending a lot of money, especially for a high school senior, and these numbers may be even a little low compared to what some of us are spending today. But we know Michael's rough cell phone payment is $45. He pays for his cell phone all the way down through his personal care. Okay, products that he might need at a store, deodorant, toothpaste, whatever it might be, those are what we consider to be personal care items. You kind of see and you kind of look at Michael's priorities, and you realize Michael likes to eat and Michael likes to have a good time. So his food allowance and his entertainment allowance are much higher than any of his other costs. But those are Michael's personal financial decisions. Selena, on the other hand, we know doesn't have a cell phone or a car insurance payment. She doesn't even pay for gas. Why? She's a freshman. She can't drive. So even though her costs are a little bit lower, they still somehow, some way reflect her personal preferences. Selena spends much less money on food than Michael does. But she doubles the amount of money that Michael spends on clothing. When you add these all up, you look at the total expenses. Michael is spending roughly $410 a month on those given expenses. His counterpart, Selena, is spending roughly $178 a month. While it may not seem that high, while it may not seem that low, we have to put it in comparison to how much money they are making. Michael's estimated income on a given month is $544, whereas Selena's is $160. Hopefully, as you're sitting here looking at this, you realize what the problem is. The problem being, Michael can afford to spend his money on those things and still have some money left over every month that he can choose to put into savings. He can choose to save up for that computer he's wishing to buy or prepare himself for college. Selena, on the other hand, actually is taking in a lower amount of money than what she needs. And if this were the real world, Selena's bank account would be in the red. She would have overdrawn. She would have spent more money than what she actually had. So if we look at these two differences, we know we need to figure out a way to balance Selena's difference. We need to get her back above zero and get her back into the black. One easy way we can do that is by building a spending plan. Selena's young. She's younger than you are. Michael is the same age. Michael may have his priorities in a little better position than what Selena does. But for each one of them, and for you sitting here watching this, we need to understand what our goals are. Our SMART goals from the first part of this module, but our goals for life. What do we want this money for, and how are we going to save the money, and then eventually how are we going to use the money? The second step is how long will the plan be used? We can all establish some type of saving plan that would allow us to save a lot of money in the short term. But using that same plan with those same principles over a long range period might actually hurt us financially. The third step is realizing how much income is available. If you're making a financial plan for the summer months before you go off to school, you may be making more money then than you would now. Why, you might ask? Think about the amount of hours you have available to work now as opposed to in the future. That future could be 3 months, it could be 3 weeks. Whatever the case might be, we all are going to encounter different circumstances that for an hourly job may allow us to take in more money or may not allow us to take in more money. The fourth step, what are the anticipated expenses? Are my expenses going to go up over time? Or are they going to go down over time? That's a relative idea, and it goes hand in hand with the amount of income that is available. And then the fifth step, how does the plan need to be adjusted? Do we need to look at Michael's spending plan and his expenses and adjust them in some way, shape, or form? Do we need to look at Selena's plan and say we need to take some money away from this area and allocate it to this area so that we don't have a negative $18 amount left over? So look at your income. I think we all have somewhat of an idea of maybe what we want to do in life. We also may have an idea of how much money that career will make us. So in terms of predicting your income, some tips that we want to use. We know we are going to be paid in a monetary amount for a job. There's not too many jobs out there that are paid via trade items or bartered items. We also need to understand that we may have a job or we may be given a regular allowance, and that may be our only income. So understanding what type of money we're bringing in and where that money is coming from is key. And then we have to be conservative in this prediction. It helps you by estimating at a lower amount than a higher amount. Always kind of shortchange yourselves when you're making a financial plan. Why? 2 reasons. 1, you know that you have at least that amount of money, or you will have at least that amount of money that you're planning for. And then 2, after all of these expenses are accounted for, we may have some left over. And that leftover amount of money can be used in a variety of ways, one of them which is saving that money for a future expense. And then don't count on windfalls. Don't count on winning the lottery. Don't count on working overtime a given week. Don't count on babysitting for an extra hour at the job you have. Count your regular income. Count the regular amount of time in the regular job that you do on a given basis. So once we have these expenses now and we have our income, we can look at the different type of expenses that we need to plan for. The first is a fixed expense. We know that a fixed expense is a regular payment. It's something that comes every month. Something like a house payment, a car insurance payment, a phone bill. In this case, we use an internet fee as our example. A variable expense is one that's known, but it's irregular in payment. I may go to the grocery store every week, but one week I may spend $50 more or $50 less than I did the previous week. And then a periodic payment as well. It's known, but it's usually an occasional fee. School fees, going to a movie, doing some form of entertainment. Those are periodic payments that while we know we are expecting them to come about, they may not happen at the same time and they may not be for the same amount every month. So some tips to estimate your expenses. Use an average for a variable expense. Use what you might spend on average in a given month for groceries, or an average in a given month for putting gas in your car. And then secondly, split the periodic expenses into chunks. If we know that I have to pay $1,200 a year for my car insurance, we'll split that chunk up into 12 months, and now you have $100 a month to pay. A very kind of smart tip So what we're talking about in this idea of paying yourself first is this acronym SAVE. All this acronym SAVE is referring to is the ability to save money up for potentially a big ticket item. We call it paying yourself first because of the idea that we are the ones who are A, responsible for the income, but B, also responsible for the expenses. So the more money that we can save for the future, the less immediate income that we would have to spend on that given item. The S in SAVE refers to setting aside money for a big ticket item. That big ticket item could be a variety of things. It could be a TV, it could be a computer, it could be an iPad or an iPhone, whatever it might be, whatever in your life comes about that you feel that you need to save money up for. The next thing we want to do is, as we're saving this money, we want to avoid borrowing. There's nothing worse that you can do than when you decide that you want to save up money, to go and instead of using the cash flow that you have coming in, to use a credit card or a line of credit to purchase another item. Always try your best to pay with cash. Whatever money you have left after your expenses, you'll be able to then take it and save up for these items. It's always very wise to save a little now for later. You could start saving now for Christmas shopping. You could start saving now for your senior year in college. Whatever purchase or event you have in your life that you might want to save money up for, it's better to save a little over a long period of time than it is to try and save a huge chunk of money in a very short period of time. And then every time you pay yourself, you have more money to spend. That's the beauty of it. We're saving ourselves, we're saving up money, we're saving up money, we're saving up money. And then all of a sudden we look in our bank account and we have much more money than we could have ever imagined. And what can we do with that money? We can continue to save, we can continue to accumulate wealth, or we can spend it on the big ticket item or the small ticket item, whatever it might be that we had so wanted. Now, the ideal situation here looks like this. We always want to be spending at or below our means. It's never good to spend more money than you make, correct? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense how you could possibly do that. So, I like to use the equation of this. You always want to try to keep your expenses equal to or greater than your income. And you might say, well, wait a second, Mr. Lumen, that doesn't make any sense. But if you really break down this equation and look at what it's saying, you'll understand what I mean. Let's say we make $10,000 over the course of 5 months. So we're taking in $2,000 a month. If I limit how much money I'm spending, then I know I'll never be in a bad situation. Obviously, we're not going to sit here and say that our expenses are going to be twice our income. That means we'd have to be borrowing a lot of money. But if you look down below, I think this puts us in a little more perspective for you. If our expenses are greater than our income, we're spending more money than we're making. We know that in order to fix that, we'd have to see our variable expenses go down and our income go up. We know those are two hard things to control. It's hard to control your expenses, and it's also very hard to control your income. But on the right is really what we're talking about. This is what I would like to see happen, and many people would like to see happen in financial planning. If your income is greater than your expenses because you were able to limit your expenses, your savings funds will go up and your loan obligations will go down. And in terms of building a sound financial portfolio and a sound financial background for you, or in layman's terms, putting you in the best financial position possible, we always want to see our savings go up and our loans go down. And if we can do that, we know that we're securing a good future for us. So we bring in Maya. Now Maya's in a little bit different of a situation than some of us are, but Maya is a high school senior and she works part-time. She has to pay her car loan, she has to pay a few other bills, including her cell phone bill. But she comes up with a plan, and her plan is to save money to allow her to go on a trip and to also help to save for college tuition. So what I'm going to ask that you do right now is to pause this video for a few seconds. And as the video is paused, pay special attention to the 4 questions that are listed below. What would you do to help Maya complete her plan? What steps would you suggest? What would you tell her to do? And what would you tell her not to do? So imagine now we're in Maya's shoes, or you're in your own shoes, and we don't have a spending plan. What are the negative aspects that could come up, the negative events that could come up without a spending plan? First, we may come up short on money. There's not a worse feeling in the world than to be short on money. Imagine what that would be like. You get paid on a Friday. You go home over the weekend and you don't have really much care about your expenses. You're going to relax. You're going to enjoy the weekend. And Monday comes around and you pay some bills. Tuesday comes around, you pay some more bills. And the next thing you know, because you were not smart with your money and you had no true plan, on Wednesday you have hardly any money left. And now you're expected to make a very small amount of money last until your next paycheck, which is 10 days away. You're limiting your life. You're also putting yourself in a potentially dangerous situation, because if that's what you do and that's what you consistently do, you have no ability to save. None of us can see the future. None of us can sit here and say that we won't get an fender bender on the way home, or our computer won't get a virus and it needs to be replaced. You always have to be preparing for your next step. On top of that negative aspect, we know that it's more likely to not reach a long-term spending goal. If your money goes towards college and your goal is to save as much of that money as you can for the next 4 years of your life, living day to day and saving minimum amounts of money will not help you achieve that goal. And that not only goes for now, but that goes for later on in life as well. We know we may need to give up something you planned if the money needs to be used for unexpected emergencies. On top of that, there's this additional amount of stress that goes with knowing you don't have as much money as you need, and as much money as you want as well. And lastly, when we don't have money, what happens? We rely on others for financial help. This could be our parents, our brothers and sisters, family members, friends, whomever it might be. But when you ask somebody for a loan, you are giving up that sense of independence, and you now are reaching out for help. When you reach out for that help, you're giving up your independence, you're giving up your sole responsibility for your financial decisions. And lastly, we look at this idea, and this is what I'm going to ask that you do and prepare for the next class. I'm going to ask that you create your own spending plan. What I'm going to ask that you do is to take a sheet of paper and divide it into 4 sections. In the first section, I'm going to ask you to write down your income. If you don't have an income or you don't get an allowance, put down $1,000. I know that might seem high for some of you, and that's absolutely fine. In the next column, put your expenses. Everything that you would spend money on, or you think that you would spend money on over the course of a given month. The third column, I want you to plan for one of these following situations. A big purchase in your life, a TV, a car, a cell phone, a computer, whatever it might be, or an upcoming event. Maybe you have a wedding coming up, or a trip that you want to take, or just monthly expenses in general. How are you going to save money to help pay down your student loans or help pay down your car payment? And then in the fourth column, put how successful you think you'll be, and create a little bit of a plan for how you're going to save money in order to achieve that given goal. If you have any questions while you're doing this, feel free to stop in and see me. I'll see you next time, everybody.